I will be reading a statement on behalf of Mahmoud Khalil.
The person in the photo is Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian-American activist with legal permanent residency, green card, in the United States. He's a graduate student at Columbia University, set to graduate in December 2024. He became well known for organizing and leading pro-Palestinian protests on the Columbia University campus in the spring of 2024. These protests were directed against Israel's military actions in Gaza and the U.S. as support for Israel. During these protests, Khalil served as one of the main negotiators between the students and the university administration, making him a prominent figure in the pro-Palestinian movement. Why was he arrested and facing deportation? On March 8, 2025, Mahmoud Khalil was arrested by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, IC, at his university dormitory in New York. According to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and officials from the Trump administration, the arrest was based on an executive order signed by Trump aimed at targeting activities deemed anti-Semitic or supporting terrorism. Specifically, the Department of Homeland Security claimed that Khalil led activities aligned with Hamas, a U.S.-designated terrorist organization, though no concrete evidence was publicly provided to support this allegation. The Trump administration cited Section 237 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which gives the Secretary of State the authority to deport individuals whose presence or activities might have serious adverse consequences on U.S. foreign policy, even if they have not been charged with a specific crime. Khalil's green card was revoked, and he is currently being held in an immigration detention center in Louisiana, awaiting deportation proceedings. This is seen as part of President Trump's campaign promise to take a tough stance on foreign students or legal permanent residents involved in pro-Palestinian protests. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated, "When you come to America as a visitor, you are here as a visitor. We can refuse to issue you a visa. If you tell us, I am a staunch supporter of Hamas, a brutal organization that kidnaps children, rapes young girls, takes hostages, and leaves their bodies returned more than living hostages. If you plan to incite such activities on a university campus, we will deny your visa. If you already have a green card through this visa, we will deport you. You don't have the right to stay here." Why were there protests in New York? After Khalil's arrest, massive protests erupted in New York City. Hundreds of people gathered at Federal Plaza in Manhattan and near Columbia University, demanding his release. These protesters included students, professors, civil rights organization members, and ordinary citizens who believed Khalil's arrest was a serious violation of the First Amendment, freedom of speech. They argued that Khalil's actions had been lawful and non-violent, and accused the Trump administration of using immigration laws to suppress dissent. Democratic Congress member Jesus Chuy Garcia stated, "Detaining a U.S. student and resident for exercising his right to free speech is not only illegal, it is a direct threat to our democratic values. This is an authoritarian act, and another attempt to weaponize immigration to silence dissent. The Trump administration must release Mahmoud Khalil immediately." Khalil is Palestinian, and his wife is a U.S. citizen, 8 months pregnant. His supporters believe his arrest is not just political retaliation, but also has racial and identity-based targeting. As a member of Columbia University, Khalil's arrest shocked many students and faculty, who feared it could signal further repression of campus activists. Civil rights organizations like the New York Civil Liberties Union, NYCLU, called the arrest retaliatory and an attack on immigrant rights and academic freedom. Some protesters carried signs reading "Free Mahmoud Khalil," emphasizing that they viewed this as political persecution rather than legitimate law enforcement. One of the most vocal figures in the protests was Zohran Mamdani, a New York state legislator and 2025 New York City mayoral candidate. Mamdani, a democratic socialist, is also the first Ugandan American and the third Muslim legislator in the New York State Assembly. His seemingly intense form of protest has captured the attention of many New Yorkers. On March 10, 2025, U.S. District Judge Jesse M. Furman issued a temporary injunction halting the deportation of Mahmoud Khalil. This decision sparked widespread and diverse reactions in American society. Supporters hailed it as an important check on the abuse of executive power. At Columbia University, student and faculty groups, such as Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine, held rallies, calling the ruling a victory for justice. They believe Khalil's arrest was a direct attack on campus protest movements, and Furman's injunction provided a respite for academic freedom and political expression. The Columbia Spectator reported that students saw this as a resistance to the Trump administration's chilling effect strategy. The NYCLU and the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, praised Furman's decision, calling it a major setback for the Trump administration's retaliatory immigration policies. They stated that it protected the First Amendment rights of legitimate residents. Liberal media outlets, such as MSNBC, referred to this ruling as a setback for Trump's anti-immigration agenda, emphasizing its potential to protect immigrant communities. Conservative critics and pro-Israel organizations, like the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, and the Jewish Defense League, JDL, strongly criticized Furman's ruling. They argued that Khalil's protest activities were linked to Hamas, posing a threat to U.S. security and Jewish community interests. At rallies outside the New York courthouse, Trump supporters shouted, "Send them back," and later grabbed the MAGA flags from those opposing them. President Trump reiterated his allegations against Khalil on March 10th via Truth Social. ICE proudly apprehended and detained Mahmoud Khalil, a radical foreign pro-Hamas student on the campus of Columbia University. This is the first arrest of many to come. We know there are more students at Columbia and other universities across the country who have engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity, and the Trump administration will not tolerate it. Many are not students, they are paid agitators. He further stated, "We will find, apprehend, and deport these terrorist sympathizers from our country, never to return again. If you support terrorism, including the slaughtering of innocent men, women, and children, your presence is contrary to our national and foreign policy interests, and you are not welcome here." Jesse Furman's temporary injunction and his background. Judge Jesse M. Furman was nominated by former President Barack Obama in 2011 and confirmed by the Senate in 2012. Before his appointment, he served as an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, handling criminal cases, including drugs, firearms, and gang-related offenses. Some on social media have criticized his background, noting that his wife is a prominent Democratic activist and that their children have ties to Democratic figures. Some conservatives call him an extreme left-wing judge and accuse him of shielding terrorism sympathizers. However, a surprising perspective came from Amjad Taha, a political strategist and analyst from the UAE who stated, "No Muslim or Arab country wants Mahmoud Khalil, a pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic, racist sympathizer." Before infiltrating Columbia University, he wandered through Hezbollah's terror centers in Beirut, with a mission not to study but to radicalize. His goal is to hijack students' minds, turning them from knowledge seekers into Hamas propaganda pawns, tools destined to become human shields or spokespeople for Islamic extremism. Democrats demand his release, not out of principle but out of political desperation. With nothing else to sell, they latch onto this trend, pretending to champion youth empowerment. Hundreds of these so-called activists are academic failures, culture-hating misfits, and naive fools with no grasp of the ideology they endorse. Allowing Mahmoud Khalil back into universities is no different from welcoming ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The only difference is, he knows the PR playbook. Shave the beard, play the victim when caught, and let the useful idiots do the rest. Conclusion. Mahmoud Khalil, as a figure in Columbia University's protests, became a target of the Trump administration, facing arrest and deportation, despite not being charged with specific crimes. The protests in New York reflect widespread concern over free speech and immigrant rights, while the Trump administration views it as a necessary action to protect national security and foreign policy. The federal judge has temporarily blocked Khalil's deportation, but the case is still in legal proceedings, with a hearing scheduled for March 27th in Louisiana. It appears that the Trump administration's border protection and immigration policies, particularly in relation to foreign students involved in protests, remain an ongoing challenge. Thank you for watching. See you next time.